let's talk damage in Disney Lorcana. In particular, so you can be fully prepared to get the most out of these two cards. When it comes to the idea of damage in Disney Lorcana, it is something that is both simple and getting increasingly complex as new sets come out. In the recently released Comprehensive Rules 2.0, damage is covered in Section 1.9. The important words to pull out of that are that damage on a character or location is represented by damage counters, and that damage can be dealt, put, removed, moved, or taken. At one point or another while playing Disney Lorcana, you're going to come across all 5 of these terms describing damage. So by knowing how each one works, you're going to be able to use them to their full effectiveness. If I had to sum up what you're going to learn in this video, it's this. All damage in Disney Lorcana is taken, but not all damage is dealt, put, or moved. Damage being dealt is the most common type of damage you'll encounter in the game. This is the damage that comes from challenges or from actions and items that specifically say they deal damage. Here's an example of a basic challenge. It's player A's turn, and they have an Elsa Concerned Sister out in play. Player B has a Christopher Robin joining the fun out, and Christopher Robin is exerted, meaning it can be challenged. Player A exerts Elsa, and declares Elsa is going to challenge Christopher Robin. Elsa has a strength of 2, and deals 2 damage to Christopher Robin, so Christopher Robin receives 2 damage counters. Christopher Robin has a strength of 1, so he deals 1 damage back to Elsa, and Elsa receives 1 damage counter. Damage can also be dealt by actions and items. Say instead of challenging with Elsa, player A instead plays Fire to Cannons, which lets them deal 2 damage to a chosen character and chooses Christopher Robin. Again, Christopher Robin is dealt 2 damage and receives 2 damage counters. It's also worth noting that Fire to Cannons does not say a character has to be exerted to deal its damage, so even if Christopher Robin was ready, Fire to Cannons could still deal damage to him. Damage dealt, however, can be reduced via resist. Let's say that instead of Christopher Robin, player B had an exerted Eeyore overstuffed donkey, which has resist +1. Now, if player A plays Fire to Cannons and challenges Eeyore, the 2 damage being dealt by the cannons is reduced by 1 because of Eeyore's resist 1, meaning Eeyore is actually dealt just 1 damage and receives 1 damage counter. Resist also resets every time a character is dealt damage. So if after playing Fire the Cannons, player A then also decides to challenge Eeyore with Elsa, dealing 2 damage, Eeyore's resist will once again reduce the damage dealt to 1, adding 1 more damage counter. Eeyore will also hit Elsa back, and his 4 strengths will deal 4 damage counters to Elsa. Since 4 damage is equal or greater to an Elsa's willpower of 2, Elsa is banished. Damage put is a different form of damage that skips the damage dealing process and goes straight to applying damage counters to targeted cards. Let's say that instead of playing Fire the Cannons, player A instead plays Malicious Mean Scary, which puts 1 damage counter on each opposing character. In this situation, Christopher Robin would receive 1 damage counter. But what if Eeyore was also out? Wouldn't his resist +1 cause him to receive no damage? No, it would not, because damage put is not the same as damage dealt, and resist specifically reduces only damage dealt, so Eeyore would still have 1 damage token put on him from Malicious Mean Scary. Removing damage is also an ability in Disney Lorcana, and it's important because unlike some other TCGs, character damage does not fall off at the end of turn, but some cards do have the ability to remove damage. Let's go back to Elsa and Christopher Robin. It is now player B's turn, and they ready Christopher Robin, but the 2 damage from Elsa is still there. But let's say player B had also had a Rapunzel Sunshine out on the board, which has the ability Magic Hair that allows Rapunzel to be exerted to remove up to 2 damage from a chosen character. So player B exerts Rapunzel and uses her ability to remove the 2 damage from Christopher Robin. Damage removed is removed from the game entirely. Subsequently, you can think of damage moved as a combination of removing and putting damage. Let's say instead of having Rapunzel on the board, player B instead has the item Rose Lantern. Rose Lantern's ability, Mystical Petals, allows the lantern to be exerted, 2 ink paid, to move 1 damage from chosen character to the chosen opposing character. So player B exerts the Rose Lantern, removing 1 damage counter from Christopher Robin, and opting to instead add that damage counter to Elsa, giving her 2 damage counters. As the 2 damage counters are equal or greater than the 2 willpower Elsa has, Elsa is then banished. Also, if player A had a character with resist on their side, such as for example Eeyore, and Rose Lantern is activated, the 1 damage counter can in fact be moved over to Eeyore, bypassing resist because it is damage put and not damage dealt. As I said at the beginning of the video, all this information is important to know because of 2 recent additions to the game, those being Rapunzel Ready for Adventure and Lilo Bundled Up. Rapunzel's ability Act of Kindness states that whenever one of your characters is chosen for support until the start of your next turn, the next time they would be dealt damage, they take no damage instead. We won't talk about the support mechanic here outside of saying that with Rapunzel out on the board, it creates a change in how damage is dealt. In this situation, let's say Rapunzel has given Act of Kindness to Christopher Robin. Player A exerts Elsa to challenge Christopher Robin and deal 2 damage. Since challenges deal damage, Act of Kindness activates, so even though 2 damage was dealt, Christopher Robin instead takes no damage. Elsa would still take the 1 damage back from Christopher Robin in the challenge. Now, if after that challenge, player A then plays Fire the Cannon to deal 2 damage to Christopher Robin, Act of Kindness no longer applies, and Christopher Robin would receive 2 damage counters. It's also worth remembering that any resist a character has also applies to whether Act of Kindness is spent or not. So if, for example, Rapunzel gave Act of Kindness to Eeyore, which has resist 1, and player B tries to challenge Eeyore with Christopher Robin in an attempt to remove Act of Kindness, it would not work, since Eeyore's resist 1 takes the 1 damage dealt by Christopher Robin and reduces it to 0 damage dealt. Since no damage has been dealt to Eeyore, Act of Kindness protection has not been removed. Act of Kindness specifically applies to damage dealt, not damage put or moved. So let's say that instead of challenging, player B instead plays Malicious, Mean, and Scary. Act of Kindness does not activate because the damage is put and not dealt, and Eeyore receives the 1 damage counter. But this also means that Act of Kindness protection is still active on Eeyore because put damage is not dealt damage. So if player B tried to follow up by playing Fire the Cannons on Eeyore, the 2 damage dealt would instead be 0 damage because the Act of Kindness protection was still there. Then there's this new card from the Winter Spell set, Lilo Bundled Up. This card might sound like it has the same effect as Rapunzel, but this is where reading is important. Lilo's ability Extra Layers reads that during each opponent's turn, the first time Lilo would take damage, she takes no damage instead. The important word there is take damage, which as we said is not the same thing as being dealt damage. This means Extra Layers do not only stop being dealt damage, like Rapunzel's Act of Kindness, but would also stop the first attempt to put damage on Lilo, or any attempt to move damage to Lilo as well. This of course brings the question, what if Lilo is Rapunzel's target for Act of Kindness? Well, in that case, if Lilo would be dealt damage, which can interact with both Act of Kindness and Extra Layers, the player with Lilo would choose which one prevents damage. The other protection would still be active. I hope the explanation of how damage now works in Disney Lorcana was useful to you. If there's more you're wondering about, please go ahead and leave a comment. And if you like what you watched, please like the video and subscribe to the channel, and we'll talk to you later.